And we're live. I am super excited that you guys have joined me today. Thank you so much. Today's conversation, I'm here with Omuugn, and we're going through the insights and wisdom of Omuugn. And if you're not familiar with it yet, it is the book that's taking America by a storm. It is one of two parts. We're going through this whole entire series, one topic by topic, week by week. So every Saturday morning, we join you right here with Omuugn to help you unpack the insights and wisdom of Omuugn. Now, today is one of those really difficult conversations because we're talking about the characteristics of the unenlightened. Ooh, what is that? Well, we're about to unpack that for you. But as we begin today, I want to ask you to do one thing. Please don't judge. Please listen with an open mind. And then let these thoughts roll through your head over the next few days and few weeks as you unpack them and what that means for you in your personal life. Because you might discover after today's conversation that you might start looking at things in a slightly different way. So with that, please help me welcome Omuugn.
Well, good morning. It's good to be here. A beautiful day. A beautiful overcast day that looks like rain in eastern Oregon.
And that means you don't have to go out and water the plants today. So yay. I was a homeowner before I appreciated the rain. For years, I thought, oh no, it's raining. And then when I became a homeowner and I had to pay for the water, I was like, yay, it's raining. So, all right. So today, characteristics of the unenlightened. Tell us, if you will, what exactly that is and what it means.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I realized at some point that I had not included a chapter in my book on enlightenment. I only have a chapter on the characteristics of the unenlightened. And so I asked myself why I did that. And then I came to understand that the whole book is about enlightenment. We're looking at every characteristic, every trait that makes us who we are. And as we understand those traits and look into our own lives, we become enlightened. And so the books are all about enlightenment and not just about unenlightenment. But there are different levels of enlightenment, and some people may be confused because we have different objectives and goals in our life. For example, some people are looking for a connection with deity and for a spiritual enlightenment, a great awakening, if you will. And some people, they don't understand what universal laws and foundational principles are. And maybe they don't have an interest in knowing what those are, even though those are the actual things that govern our lives, whether you're on a spiritual quest or not. And then there are principles of self-awareness, knowing who you are, what you believe what you do, why you act the way you do, the kind of relationships that you have. And then there's the quest for knowledge. Some people read novels and they entertain themselves. And some people read self-help books and books that have sort of a standard of excellence or wisdom literature that's been handed down through the ages. And so our interests will take us sort of on one path or the other. You probably are not going to spend a lot of time with novels if you spend a lot of time with esoteric teachings and wisdom literature and things that you perceive that have more value. And if you're just trying to be entertained, you'll tend to go towards all of the avenues of entertainment, which there are a profuse amount in today's world. So we also have the connections with others, with our families and with other people. And we can become enlightened in how to maximize and optimize those relationships and our interconnectedness with other people. And then there's our personal growth. Some people are satisfied with the way they are. They enjoy life, they do certain things a certain way, and they're satisfied with themselves. Well, other people are really searching to be the best version of themselves. They want to know why they believe what they believe and why they do certain things and what their habits are and if those habits are productive or unproductive. And so there are all different levels of enlightenment, from connecting with the divine to the personal development as a person, who you are and why you do what you do. And so you have to sort of decide what kind of enlightenment you want to enlighten yourself with, because you have really a lot of possibilities and a lot of options.
Is it possible to go through life and never question anything and just kind of drift aimlessly along from birth until death, and whatever happens kind of in between happens in between, and it is what it is?
You know, it's kind of interesting, but when you interact with people, when you watch television shows, when you're being entertained, look at the level of the conversations. Look at what people are really talking about, what the issues really are, and you'll find that it's really, most of the time, you'll find a very, very surface level conversation. People never get down into the real meat of reality, of what's happening, what the eternal laws are, the things that govern us, the connections with higher consciousness and with deity and different things of that nature. Most of our entertainment and things that we experience, the books that we read, are pretty mundane. They're on a very, very basic level. And so a lot of the things that we're talking about today will never come up. You'll never hear them in a normal conversation. And when you go to the gas station to get gas for your automobile, no one there is going to ask you anything meaty or deep or that will make you think. If
Maybe
you go
that's
to
a good thing.
it could be a good thing. But it doesn't matter where you go. It could be the gym or the grocery store or the hardware store or a club or meeting or wherever it is. Most people are going to talk about the weather and just superficial things. And so when we're talking about enlightenment, we're talking about a whole different level of reality. We're talking about getting into the nuts and bolts of what you believe and why you believe what you believe and what you do with what you believe and whether or not your belief is accurate or not. Because a lot of us have false beliefs because of our infancy, growing up in our home, our environment, the schools that we went to and the teachers that taught us, and the cultural things and the traditional things, societal things. We're influenced by all of those factors. And so we have a certain belief system, and a lot of times we don't question our belief system. One of the things going around today is whether the earth is actually round or flat. And most people have never really questioned that because it is so obvious. Well, when you look at it, it's really not so obvious at all. There are actually things on both sides that you might want to consider. So just having an open mind, being curious, asking questions, doing research about things, a lot of things that we just take for granted. That's what we normally do. But if we stop and look at things, look at the way nature works, look at all of the processes in nature, how the world renews itself, and how things are growing and changing and developing, being mindful of those things is a totally different world than just being entertained and sliding by on the surface of things. There's so much meat and depth in everything.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because there are a lot of people that could have a huge debate, and we'll just go back to the one that you mentioned, the earth being round or flat. There could be a huge debate where there are two parties with opposing views, and they both think that they're right. What do you do in a situation where you have your own moment of enlightenment and there's another person that has their own moment of enlightenment, but they happen to conflict and they both think they're right? What do you do in a situation like that?
Well, we do that all of the time, because every person has their own belief system. Every person has their own belief system. They were raised a different way. They were taught different things. They've had different experiences. They've interacted with different people. They've read different books. So everyone has sort of put their life together according to what they believe. And everybody, not everybody, but most people believe that what they believe is true and it's accurate because that's what they believe. And that's why they believe what they believe. And so even to question our own belief system takes us out of our comfort zone into a place that's really, for some, a very scary place. So, yeah, it's just this awareness, cultivating mindfulness, where you sit down with yourself and say, who am I really? Actually, I'm just finishing a book called Who Am I Really? And
This is a book that you're writing?
yes, it will come out here before the end of the year.
I would love to read that.
But it's interesting because I came up with 58 different things that we really are. And I sort of look at those different things in depth. And it's kind of an interesting journey because we just usually think that we're who we are without really giving deep thought to who we really are and why we are who we are. And we have a tendency not to move out of our comfort zone. We don't want to go out onto the fringe of new ideas and new concepts and exciting possibilities. We're kind of afraid to venture out of our comfort zone.
Why is that?
Well, for many different reasons. Maturity takes place on a lot of different levels. A lot of people get older without maturing emotionally or intellectually or socially or religiously, or on and on and on and on it goes. Unless you stop and question things, you don't really learn, and you're sort of satisfied with where you are. Actually, the reality is that every day is a new day. When you go to sleep at night, your conscious mind shuts off, and you go into a world of alternate reality. You dream different things and you have different experiences. Some people have lucid dreams where they're actually given information that is profound for them. And some people have nightmares of maybe what they're filling their minds with in their entertainment world, or if you choose to look at horror films, maybe you'll have nightmares that bother you. If you're studying enlightenment things, maybe you'll have lucid dreams that will instruct you and teach you different things. So our worlds are just drastically different. And we have to be aware of what our world is. We have to stop and think. Being mindful is living in the present moment. This present moment is filled with possibilities, is filled with information, is filled with possible excitement, new adventures. This moment is exciting. And for a lot of people, this moment is just the next football game or the next trivial conversation about somebody else who it doesn't really make any difference. When you end the conversation, you'll be exactly the same person you were when the conversation started. Maybe a little worse off because maybe you've heard some gossip, and so you will have deteriorated a little bit in your resonant frequency. But anyway, life is really exciting, and if you're mindful of the possibilities, it just takes you into a different world, a world of clarity and purpose, where you begin to look at reality and to see what reality really is, and the illusions that we live in. We live in a world today that is crazy. It's crazy. We have thousands and hundreds of thousands of people crossing our borders, influencing our nation, our communities, They have different belief systems and different cultures. And we have, I think we mentioned last week, we have $33 trillion of debt. And what does that mean? Sometimes we just go on day after day after day without giving that a second thought. $33 trillion would really impact my budget in a significant way. I mean, that's a lot of money. It has to impact our country in a certain way. And it's interesting that the people that we have elected to represent us in Congress, the last I heard, there were only 13% of people who thought Congress was moving in the right direction. So most people in our country don't even agree with the people that they have elected to represent them. And we have riots in the streets, and people are burning buildings and carrying signs and causing a big ruckus. And we, as a nation, sort of let them do that. It's interesting that some of our major cities, like San Francisco, downtown San Francisco has now shut down. Stores like Kohl's and Walmart and some of the major brand stores, they've all moved out of San Francisco. Many of them have moved out of San Francisco. And the homeless people have moved in, and there's a whole new culture there. And so where does everyone stand on those issues? I mean, those are serious issues. We have hundreds of thousands of homeless people in our country now. It's a whole new culture, a whole new reality that's happening around us. And are we really enlightened? Why would enlightened people let all of these things happen?
Well, let me
Who
ask
is
you
it?
this question. How do you know if you're unenlightened? I mean, how do you know if you're guilty of not being aware?
Well, if you think about the things that I just mentioned, what is your response to that? An unenlightened person would probably shrug their shoulders and say, well, those are things that I can't do anything about. The ocean is filled with millions of tons of plastic and garbage. There's nothing I can do about that. All of our Congress is going in the wrong direction. There's nothing I can do about that. And so it depends on how you look at things. One person can make a difference. One enlightened person could make a difference. If you look at Mahatma Gandhi in India, India was moving in a direction, and one little man with a profound dedication and knowledge and a belief system that was powerful changed a whole nation. And so we have a lot more ability to affect things than we realize. We're actually powerful, dynamic, multidimensional beings, which gets into my book on who we are really. But we won't get into that today. But yeah, we're not, and in regard to your question, we're not called upon to judge other people. We're not called upon to determine whether their belief system is accurate, because everyone has their own belief system. What we're called to do is to be understanding and empathetic, and to share the light and knowledge that people are willing to receive. It's better if people come to you and say, what do you think about this? And then you share your ideas with them. If you go to other people and say, let me tell you what you should be thinking, you're going to have a lot of resistance, and people don't take to that very kindly.
You know, it's interesting
So,
you bring that up because for me, and this is kind of a sidebar, but for me, I live in an area where there are a lot of missionaries that will come from various churches. And I'll be out working in the yard, and they will come up and they will interrupt me while I'm trying to edge my yard. And they'll say, you know, you need to know about the Jesus. And I say, thank you for sharing the information. I'm in the middle of mowing my yard here. And they have an inspiration to want to share something right then because that's part of their time frame. Whereas if it were part of my time frame and I were in search of stories of the Jesus. I would be more receptive because it was in my time frame, not because someone was interrupting me while I was trying to hurry and mow my yard before it turns dark and I get done for the day. And what I became aware of is not that I was opposed to the messaging as I was opposed to the timing of the messaging. And I know that for me, there's a certain time that I am more receptive. And it's usually there's something that's usually triggered it. And I don't know if this is true for all people, but there is usually either something where in my life something's not working. And so I have to stop and take an inner look at myself and say, I need a different result because I'm asking the wrong questions of myself. Or there's something that I saw in someone else. And you mentioned us being observant and aware of the things around us. I saw someone living a better way. And I'm like, hey, I don't know what they're doing, but I want to do whatever they're doing because they look healthy and happy. And that doesn't reflect what I'm feeling right now myself. So my question is, what is a way for an unenlightened person to trigger the awareness that I'm unenlightened and I need a different way of looking at the world?
Well, it goes back to the concept that you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes you're totally unaware. You're unaware of what you don't know. I remember years ago, I was in a conversation with someone, and they mentioned sacred geometry to me, and that was a term that I'd never heard before. And so I began to do research on sacred geometry, and there were only 3 websites on sacred geometry at the time. Very, very little information. And now if you go onto the web, you cannot read all of the information about sacred geometry. There is such a profusion of sacred geometry. So sometimes we're just introduced to an idea that we've never thought of before. And if there's something in us that wants to understand things and to grow and be the best version of ourselves, when we hear something, something will trigger a curiosity. What is sacred geometry? What is ascension? What is enlightenment? What is, Stephen Covey wrote a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. That book won't ring a bell with a lot of people, but for a lot of people, they read that and they said, wow, this is how successful people really think and how they operate. And so when we're introduced to a new idea, if we at least explore and stretch our minds a little bit and move to the edge of our comfort zone, then there are a lot of possibilities that we can experience that otherwise we wouldn't. For example, if you've never heard of Jesus and missionaries come to your door and say, hey, have you heard about Jesus? If you've never heard about Jesus, that should maybe trigger something in you to question and to say, hey, why don't you come in and tell me about Jesus? I've never heard about him. Or if you know all about Jesus and you're a born-again Christian and you're already excited about Jesus, you'd say, hey, talk to someone else where your time will be more valuable because I already believe in Jesus and I'm really satisfied with my belief system.
Jesus is holding the sun up here for a few more minutes while I mow my yard.
That's right. So it depends on where you are and what your understanding is. Like I say, you don't know a lot of times what you don't know. And so you should be looking for new ideas. You should be looking for concepts that would be interesting. There's no possible way that you can surf through the internet at all without running onto interesting ideas. I have a bad habit of going to YouTube and looking for self-help videos because I'm kind of a do-it-yourselfer and I like to do a lot of things on my own. And so when I find something that's interesting on how to do drywall or how to build a gazebo in your backyard or something, I will save those to a watch list that I want to look at later. And now I have over 5,000 subjects backlogged in my watch later list because there's so many things that I find interesting and I want to learn about all of these things. And so I have sort of an insatiable hunger to learn new things and to see what's going on. And so I don't have to have somebody kick me in the pants to say, hey, why don't you learn how to do something? Why don't you get a new hobby or develop some kind of a skill? There's just so many things that I want to do that I never have time for, that I'm already overloaded. So people are just really, really different. Some people are on a quest to improve themselves and to learn new things, and other people just want to be entertained and get through the day so that they can be entertained tomorrow and get through that day.
When you talk about enlightenment, are you talking about enlightenment in terms of us going to a place like YouTube to be enlightened by new information? Or is it possible that enlightenment can come from within? You talked earlier about a monk who may spend his time becoming enlightened. And for many of us, we have visions of a monk sitting on a hillside somewhere at sunrise, sitting in the lotus position and meditating, for example. Does enlightenment come from within or without?
Well, like I was saying, there are different levels of enlightenment. There are different kinds of enlightenment, from connecting to the divine down to personal growth. If you're on a quest for knowledge, enlightenment comes by going to YouTube and typing in how to do it yourself. Or if you have a particular interest in, say, you want to explore over unity energy, free energy, if you will, or multidimensional energy, such as scalar frequencies and vortex math and those kinds of things. All of those things are available if you're searching for knowledge. And so you can go any direction that you want to go. And you can improve yourself. You can become enlightened in any area that you want to become enlightened in. And I'll tell you a secret.
I like secrets. Go ahead.
This is a secret. There are limitless areas that you can research and become interested in. And if you pick one and you research it and you spend some time with it, you will become one of the authorities in that thing, because not very many people will look into very many things in depth. For example, we talked an interesting, I think, concept of establishing an environment that is conducive to optimizing ourselves. Like your home. When you walk into your home, is your environment just what you prefer it to be? Or when you look around, you say, golly, maybe I should vacuum my floors or put things away. Maybe I live in clutter and I don't really that's not what I prefer. So I need to develop different habits and look at things a different way. So we can become enlightened in a lot of different ways just by focusing on something and asking ourselves pertinent questions. Life is developed and progress is made, and our journey is complete as we ask ourselves meaningful questions. If we don't ask ourselves meaningful questions, we won't ever find meaningful answers, because you find what you're looking for. Why do you always find things in the last place you look for it?
Because you found it. So that's
Because
the
you
last
found it.
place.
So once you find it, you quit looking. But if you were to continue looking, you would probably find other things. In fact, once in a while, I'll go through a box that I haven't been through in a long time, and I'll find something that meant a lot to me in years past, and it has a lot of memories, and I learned a lot of good lessons from this thing, and I haven't even thought about it in a long time, but here it is in this box. And so if I hadn't continued searching after I found what I was looking for, I wouldn't have found this that's really meaningful to me, that can impact my life in a positive way. So don't stop looking when you find something. Always keep looking for things, looking for new ideas, looking for better ways. A lot of times we do the same job over and over and over again. We don't really like to do the job, but is there a better way to do the job? Is there a more efficient way? Is there a more time constructive way to do it? Maybe I can engage other people to help me do this job that I don't like to do, or there are limitless possibilities. Every problem has numerous solutions. And I'm involved with a person who's on a building project. And when they build, they'll start building the first things that comes to mind. This is the way you do this. And I will say, well, there are other possibilities. If we did it this way, maybe it would have this effect. And if we did it that way, it would have that effect. And so before we just start building something because we had an idea, let's look at the ideas that involve this project that we're working on and really do the one that we prefer. And there's maybe one that's the better way to do this that will give us a better result, and it will save material, and it will be a higher quality if we do it this way rather than just doing the first thing that comes to mind. So there are a lot of different ways to think about things. I'm also just finishing a book on how to think, and that's coming up before the end of the year also. But
I'm going to have to get all my books in line so I can read them all one by one.
But it's interesting that a lot of times we think about everything the same way, but there are different ways to think about different things. And there are different strategies that you can use in your thinking process. And you can combine different strategies to make your thinking more profound and more effective. So there are a lot of different things that we can do to become enlightened in a lot of different ways for every individual.
I know that for years in my business, I was going to try to be a millionaire. I thought if I become a millionaire, then I will have arrived, as if being a millionaire would give me the answers I was looking for. And as I got closer to the $1 million range, I realized that $1 million just doesn't go very far anymore. I mean, it's not the end all be all that I thought it once was. So I bumped myself up to the next level. And I said, if I were a billionaire, what would that look like? And what would my choices be at $1 billion versus if I were a thousandaire, for example? How would my choices be different? And one of the things that came to my attention one day is a comment someone made. They said, you'll never have $1 million body if you eat off the dollar menu. And then there was a picture of a soggy little hamburger or something that I'm guessing was on the dollar menu. And I started thinking about that. And I thought, it's interesting because the more money we have, our choices change. And if you look and you study billionaires, what's really interesting and fascinating is that they do things that thousandaires and millionaires are not willing to do. So I started saying to myself, all right, I'm going to elevate myself. I'm going to graduate myself to the billionaire in training. And if I'm a billionaire in training, what do I eat for dinner? And am I eating crappy food that's going to take the one tool that I really have, which is my body and my brain, that can heal itself, that can reason, that can think, that has empathy, that has emotions and all the things? I'm going to pollute that with junk food? Or am I going to actually feed it really healthy, natural foods that's going to give me the best version of myself? And then if that's true and I follow that logic through, I may not be enlightened in all the other areas, but as I stumble on each individual different idea, then I say, if I was a billionaire in training, how would I manage this particular situation? And sometimes it means I have to go to YouTube and I have to look up something new because I don't have the answers. But the answers are probably not the way I'm doing it right now. Because if I was doing something different right now, I wouldn't be the thousandaire or the millionaire. I would be a billionaire, right? And I'm baffled when I look at the basics. And the basics for me are this: I have 168 hours in a week. So does Richard Branson. And I don't know what me and Richard Branson are doing differently, but he made some different choices that made him a billionaire than what I did. And I did not become a billionaire. He made some different choices. And so when I look at people that have actually achieved significant wealth, I was watching a Netflix documentary on Richard Branson. And there he is in the 70s, and he's cycling up the side of a really steep mountain. And I'm like, wow, that would be amazing for anyone in their 20s or 30s. And here he is in the 70s, cycling up the side of a mountain, doing things that other common people are not willing to do. And it's his way of saying hello to the morning, enjoying the sunrise, and then making sure that his health and his wellness is prime and key for whatever decisions he's about to make for the course of the day. And I say, whoa, I'm tired and I want to sleep in this morning. And yet the guy that has the billions of dollars is up at the crack of dawn, cycling up the side of a mountain at sunrise because he's making choices that I was not willing to make. And I think then in terms of enlightenment, maybe I don't have the answers. But if I was a billionaire in training, what would I do differently? And it's interesting because it has informed a lot of the choices that I've made, that doing things radically different than what I'm doing right now so that I can get radically different results.
Well, one thing that you mentioned is really profound, and that is if you want to be something or accomplish something, you have to discipline yourself and do what is required for that thing. A lot of us don't have the self-discipline and the consistency and the integrity to take an idea and follow it all the way through. Like you say, you don't maybe not want to be a billionaire, but you want to be enlightened. So who are some of the mentors that you can look at for enlightenment? Who are some of the people who have written some of the best literature that the world knows? Why is some literature called the wisdom literature that has come down through the ages, that give to us insights into universal laws that work, mathematical formulas that work, different things that profoundly affect and impact our lives and everything we do? Those are the kinds of people that we should be studying. And why did Leonardo da Vinci think the way he did? Why did he have so many creative ideas? What was his process? And if you watched a documentary on Leonardo da Vinci, you'd gain some insight into that. Whereas if you watch a cartoon or some trivia, you really don't learn anything. I don't want to get into video games because video games are really popular in our culture. There are companies who have hired literally thousands of people who work full-time developing video games. They just develop video games. And I have never played a video game, but I have watched some people play a video game. And it seems like when the video game is over, you haven't learned anything. Maybe you've developed some dexterity skills with your thumbs or your controls, whatever you're using. But as far as real information and what is real, you're not going to run into sacred geometry probably in a video game. You're going to run into maybe some kind of a battle and meet some monster, or you're in a car race or something. It's very, very different. But before we really get into that, I would just like to finish enlightenment with this idea. And then we'll talk about the characteristics of the unenlightened. Enlightenment for the average individual is about personal growth. It's about well-being, like you talked about your diet. What would I eat if I really wanted to feel well so that I could accomplish maybe being a billionaire? And we're searching for inner peace, where at night we go to bed and it's tranquil and peaceful, and we have accomplished things that are very satisfying to us. And so we don't have any regrets or worries or stew, and we're not troubled with insomnia and pace the floor at night. We just go to bed and sleep peacefully. How wonderful is that? This is a journey of self-improvement and self-discovery and gaining universal knowledge and finding purpose and meaning in everyday life. It's attainable and a practical goal that leads to more fulfilling and harmonious existence for us. That's really what enlightenment is. It's making our life really what we want it to be. And there's so many people. I mean, there's a high incidence of people who commit suicide. How horrible would that be to be in a situation where life is so meaningless and you're so discouraged that you would actually take your own life? How many things are on your waiting to watch list on YouTube? and you don't have any of those, and you would just rather take your own life. Or people who are in marriages that are unfulfilling. It's kind of interesting that some of the billionaires that we think of, the three richest men in the world, all got divorced in the last 2 or 3 years. They have success financially, but in their own lives, they're not finding the joy and happiness and fulfillment that you would think a billionaire would have. A
Well, and
billionaire.
let me stop you right there, though. That is our perception. What if in their situation, and I'm just saying this from an open-minded perspective, what if in their particular situation they had both advanced, I'm saying they both, whoever they were in a relationship with, had advanced to where they both learned as much as they possibly could from the other person and discovered that now it was time to move on in order for them to continue their own advancement? Is it possible that it wasn't a ceremoniously disastrous situation? Maybe it was. But what if it wasn't? What if it was like, hey, I've gone as far as I possibly can go with this person, and the next natural move is for us to go our separate directions and move on? And the reason I say that is because if we look at children, children grow up under their parents' supervision. And then they get to a moment where they say, I've gone as far as I can possibly go, and I need to go out on my own, and I need to go make a life for myself. And it doesn't negate at all the parents' raising of that child. They've matured through the situation, and now it's time for them to go on to the next step. And it doesn't mean the parents love them any less. We've seen lots of people that have gotten divorced only to become best friends with their spouses while their spouses went on to do something else and they went on to do something else. But there was no harm, no foul in between. And it wasn't a vindictive situation where there was hate and animosity. Just because somebody has billions of dollars and they went their separate ways, the lucky for the person that ends up with half the money, but maybe it wasn't that there was a big disaster. Maybe it was that they went as far as they possibly could go, and now they're trying something new and moving on. What if?
Well, there are all kinds of possibilities. There's no cookie cutter answer for that question. There's sometimes that it's best for people not to be together because of certain reasons. Marriage is kind of an interesting situation because if you look at the wisdom literature and historically, marriage is a covenant relationship. And deity is actually part of that relationship. And so you have to handle covenant relationships differently than you do other kinds of relationships. The secret is growing together instead of growing apart. If you're growing a certain way and you're excited about your adventures, you should instill that in your mate, in your partner, and you should grow together, and you should become complements of one another. And if you grow apart, then sometimes it's best to go your different ways, but only under certain situations.
And I want to stop for just a second and say congratulations on what is this, 57 years of marriage?
Yeah, I have been married for 57 years.
Congratulations. That's absolutely unheard of in today's society. Yay.
Well, a lot of people have been married for a long time. Anyway, there's no one answer that fits all. One of the secrets is priorities. If you have some things that are really, really high priority in your life, and they're valueless to the people that you're around, they have other priorities, you're probably with the wrong group, because there are people who would encourage and support you in the things that you're excited about and where your journey is taking you. So it's always best to surround yourself with like people. There's a foundational principle that like attracts like. If you're on a certain frequency, you're going to attract things that are on that frequency, like turning onto a certain TV channel. That's what you're going to experience. And there are different programs that will run on that channel. You're not going to see horror movies if you're on a Christian religious channel. You're going to see pastors and different experiences. Or if you're on a country western station, you're going to hear country western music, and you're going to have certain experiences and meet certain people as they present their talents to you. And if you're on a horror station where you're watching nightmares and big creatures from the abyss and all of those things, that's what you're going to experience. So sometimes if one person is in the horror movie thing and the other person is on a religious channel and you want to watch a movie together, you're going to have a hard time maybe watching the apocalypse and the end of the world. Maybe that will combine the two elements of yeah, you can always find a way to compromise and do things, but anyway.
Speaking of which, though, I've noticed in my own marriage, which is just a fraction of the time you've been married. We've been married 21 years. But one of the things that I've noticed as we have grown apart, because our lives have taken different twists and turns, that one of the things that keeps us together is to remove us both from our elements and to go out and walk and talk. And by out walking in the neighborhood, we're walking and talking. And that's something that we have in common together, but it removes us both from our comfort zones and the world that we're both so enmeshed in during the day-to-day absent-mindednesses of the other person. And so by removing ourselves from that and putting us into an isolated environment where it's just the two of us, and we can walk and talk, we're burning calories, so we're working out. We are talking as we're walking. So there's an endorphin and there's a release of conversation and communication, and we take turns like, hey, when we get around this corner, I'm going to stop talking. It's your turn to talk. So we take turns as if this is now a chance for us to, I don't know, express our thoughts and our feelings and whatever, which is not necessarily therapeutic. It's not like us sitting at a counselor's office, but it's us able to work through some of those issues where in our own little environmental spaces, I'm glued to the internet with my clients and he's, glued to the internet doing his lending and his stuff with his clients. And so by coming together, it removes us from whatever we would have as interruptions, and it helps us then stay on task by creating a new space that we can honor between the two of us.
Well, that's potentially a very, very good thing. I mean, just spending time together in a new environment, a new situation, is therapeutic for probably both of you. The danger in that is that it can be superficial, and it might not be a time where you really delve into reality and belief systems and who you are. You need to take time to do the things that really pertain to enlightenment if you want to grow closer together. Even though it's therapeutic to spend time together, and that's a good thing, it can be a better thing if you make those conversations really meaningful, really find out what he prefers, what he likes, what he believes. You can understand him better, and then you can kind of devise a plan, a workaround in your own life to accommodate some of the things that he's really interested in and the direction that he's going. So if that works both ways, that's really ideal in a relationship.
One of the things that we did in our relationship, and this was from day one, and I think this is something that I learned at home. So I'm going to give you full credit for this one. But we have family meetings once a week, and we've done this since the day we got married. And so every Tuesday we have a short meeting. And we established before we got married that on our weekly meeting that there would be no nagging in our marriage, but that there would be one time per week, only one, where you get to bring up something that you would like the other person to work on. And you only get one. So if I have 3 things that are bothering me this week, I better pick the most important one because I only get to bring up one this week. And then during that meeting, if I could change one thing or I wish one thing were different about our relationship, this is the one thing I would pick. And of course, if you're in a relationship with the desire to make it work, you're going to continue on, with last week's thing and the week before's thing, if you're trying to make the relationship work. But that way you really are only focused on changing one thing per week that really upsets the other person or it grinds on their nerves or what have you. And then it keeps us both from nagging during the week, like, I wish you didn't do this, that, or the other, knowing that I will have a time to express that. And that with all sincerity and empathy and kindness and compassion. The other person's going to take that in the spirit in which it was intended. And we're going to try to work on that throughout the course of the next week and possibly beyond to make sure that we work on that issue. And I think that one thing, just that one, the little family meeting per week and working on those similar but serious little tiny issues. Don't let things get really out of control, and that doesn't let stuff build up week after week where there's no communication and where we're kind of at each other's throats all the time. So,
Yeah, that's really profound that you have a process to handle those kinds of things. So many people that I'm aware of don't have a process. People will process within themselves. They will have sort of their partner will do something they don't really like, but they keep that in within themselves. Or they will, like you say, nag and make it an uncomfortable situation. So you have to be careful on how you deal with things like that. But everyone needs a process that works for them. And growing up, as you remember, we had processes for everything. We had job charts, and we would try this and assign people different things, and we'd rotate the jobs. We had a chart for discipline. If I was at work and the kids were bothering mom, we had some smileys that you would move up on the chart, and if you were problematic the whole day long, they'd turn your smiley over to a frowny face, and then you had to meet with dad at the end of the day, and there was sort of a immediate karmic reaction to your behaviors for that day.
I have to interrupt you for a second because anybody that watches the replay of this is not going to know what that karmic reaction was. And as a child of Omuugn, I want to express what that was because it left a really profound and important impact on my life. I remember a couple of times I got my smiley turned over and it became a frown and I was disobedient or something bad, and I got my smiley turned over. And when dad came into the house, he came in and he looked at the smileys and mine was a frown. And he said, "Angela, I need to see you in my den." And I went inside the den, and it was an area of the house. And I remember it being, there was this really tall chair that had like those wings on it. It was a leather chair. And I sat in the chair and it just dwarfed me. I was so small in this huge chair. And he sat on the ottoman in front of me. And instead of berating me and making me feel stupid and small and insignificant and shamed and all these things, he said, "Angela, you're a very bright little girl, and I'm sure you have a very good reason for your behavior today. And I'm curious, would you share with me what it was?" Oh my goodness, talk about the psychology of wow. I sat there trying to stumble through what was my very good reason. When I got done, whatever it was I said, he said, "What do you think is a fair punishment?" And he let me decide. And so I started going through the whole list of things that we did at our house to get out of trouble. You know, I'll wash out a bucket of diapers and I'll pick out rocks out of the garden and I'll help with the dishes and I will read stories to the little kids. And he just kept saying and until finally I think I'd promised away the sun, the stars, and the moon. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I think that's justifiable for my behavior. And then on the way out the door, he said this. He said, "Your mother really needs some help. And being one of the oldest kids, I'm counting on you to be that person for her. Can I count on you?" I was like, "Yes, you can." Okay, great. That was it. That was a punishment. It was the most psychologically enriching punishment I've probably ever had because it didn't shame me in any way. It gave me a chance to express my childish thinking process of like, why did I do what I did? Which is probably a dumb thing that I did, but now I had to think through it. Now, okay, now I get the error of my ways. And then I had to come up with my own punishment, which is really not fair for a kid. But you know what? Hey, no harm, no foul. And it was one of the most interesting lessons that I ever learned. And I never forgot that. Because if in that moment I could learn to punish other people that way, because that's what we do. We take what we learn and we repeat that. As a boss and as a leader, I have an opportunity frequently to write people up and to punish people that misbehaved in the business or what have you. And I always go back to that moment where I try to, in an enlightened sort of way, give them their dignity and their respect, and let them explain to me their viewpoint, so that I'm not punishing and shaming them, but that I'm helping them look at the situation from a different set of eyes. So thank you for that. And that was a life-changing punishment for me, just FYI.
Well, I'm pleased that you remember all of the positive aspects, and we did have some other disciplines. Uh, One of them was sitting in the closet with a ball in your mouth if you misbehaved in public. Well, you could think about better behavioral patterns. But anyway, those are stories for another day. Our time is growing short, and I haven't really gotten into the characteristics of the unenlightened. I'd like to run through those just really quickly. The first one is that most people are not aware that they're not enlightened. Most people, because of their belief system, kind of think that they're enlightened people. And so, because of your upbringing, your cultural, personal experiences, your individual circumstances, people don't take the time to really realize that they're not enlightened. And so a lot of times we're unenlightened just because we're unaware that we're unenlightened. And it's not something that we do, but something that we are for these various reasons. But some of the characteristics are resistance to change. Change is taking place all of the time. And you can actually work with change to your benefit in many, many instances. And we're resistant to change. And if you're resistant to move forward to things that are happening in your life, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to become enlightened, because you're resistant to changing the way that you're living your life. A lot of people are fearful of the unknown, and they're attached to material possessions or to status, to barriers to spiritual growth. They may have a bad experience, maybe at church or something, and so pursuing spiritual things, they might be afraid of that for one reason or another, or resistant to that. And so if you're attached to material things and you have a different standard, a lot of the areas of enlightenment will never have an interest for you, because it's going to cause you to change your value system. And some people are afraid to do that. And some people have closed minds. They just don't want to hear anything new or anything different. The world is round or flat, whichever they believe, and that's the way it is, and they don't want to hear anything else. Without looking at new ideas and looking at different perspectives, they just have closed their mind to anything that would change what they already believe. Their belief system is right, and the assumptions they make are true, and nothing is going to change that. At the end of this conversation, I'm going to believe what I believe, and you're going to believe what you believe, and that's the way it is. Those people will have a hard time becoming enlightened, because if your mind is closed, you really have very little hope. And a lot of people are isolated, and they choose to remain isolated, disconnected from people that would support them and encourage them. And if you're surrounded by people who inspire you, who encourage you, and who pat you on the back and say, man, you're amazing, that sort of brings you out of your isolation shell, interacting with people in a very, very productive way. And you learn to encourage other people and inspire other people, and they can see your example. And you're looking for good examples, and you're looking for mentors. A lot of people also have emotional blocks. They've had traumas in their childhood, or there are things that have impeded their emotional maturity. And it doesn't matter how old you are, you can be emotionally immature. And you can have blockages in your emotions. Emotion is energy in motion. And when energy stops in you, you stop at that point. You're emotionally stagnant. unless you do something to get the energy moving again. And so if you have emotional blockages, those need to be addressed. And a lot of people have the personality, I guess, to be cynical or skeptical over everything. And so if a new idea is introduced to some people, their natural response is going to be negative. They're going to be against that idea just because it's a new idea. They're skeptical about everything. They're cynical about everything. There's a bad motive behind this thing, behind everything, behind every person. They just look at the world in kind of a negative aspect. And it's very difficult for those people to explore and to embrace new ideas because of just the way they look at things. And another thing, in today's world, we're overwhelmed with information. No matter where you go, like you were talking about a software program. By the time you learn a software program, there's a better one that has come out that will do the things that will do, plus other things. And the people that are graduating from college today in computer science, by the time they graduate, the computer languages that they learned are already obsolete, and the processes that they've learned are already obsolete. And there are templates to do what they've spent years learning how to do. And all they have to do now is use a template and do things a different way. So we have a lot of this information that overwhelms us, but a lot of the information is inaccurate. And a lot of information that you find on the internet and talking with other people and interacting with their belief systems is not accurate information. And so you have to have a way to discern what is true and what is not true, what is reality and what is illusion. You have to have some... I'm over my time, aren't I?
This is fascinating, though. Continue your thought.
Well, there's some other areas that we can get into that would be very, very interesting, but I know our time is up for today, and I apologize. Sometimes I get so excited I get carried away, but
well, in honor of your time, I will let you go, but I really, really enjoyed today's conversation. I just really, this is the highlight of my week. I love looking forward to these conversations when we can dig below the surface and we can ask different questions of each other and of ourselves, because it is in these moments that we say, wait a second, the world is different than I actually thought it was. And that gives us a chance to go out there and be somebody new and a better version of ourselves.
well, thank you for having me today.
You're welcome. All right, that is it for today. Again, if you are not already an owner of the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn, this is something we're covering every single Saturday. I hope that you pick up your copy today and you'll join us next time when we cover the next segment in the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn with Omuugn himself. So thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you again